powerful and available pot is leading to psychosis and violence. Alex Berenson joins me now along with Dr. David Nathan. He's the board president of Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, a psychiatrist specializing in psychotic disorders. Alex Berenson, for those who've not yet read the book, I have. What's the goal? Are you all about zero tolerance or building awareness?
Oh no, I'm not about zero tolerance. There's no way we're going to put 40 million people in jail or prison for using marijuana. We need people to know the risks here, and we need to come up with a scheme for regulation and probably decriminalization. I don't favor full legalization, but decriminalization, where users are going to get the information they need, and they're going to get help if they need help. But most of all, we need to make sure they know the risks about this drug, that most of the medical claims around it are not proven and not supported by much scientific evidence, and that this can be an addictive drug, that it is a potent drug, that it is linked to psychosis. That's what I want. And that's why I wrote the book. The idea
that it leads to violence seems so counterintuitive. Do you not buy into the stoner stereotype?
Obviously, there are plenty of people who can use marijuana and not become violent. But psychosis is a known risk for violence, and cannabis use is a known risk for psychosis. And, it's funny, with alcohol, we have people out there who drink a lot, and some of them get violent. Some of them sit at home on their couches and drink scotch until they fall asleep. We know both those things are true. They can both be true for marijuana, and the evidence suggests, the hard scientific evidence suggests that those both are true, but we've sort of forgotten that.
One more question for you, and then I'll let Dr. Nathan respond. Relative to mental illness, is the argument that smoking pot causes mental illness or that it exacerbates those traits and characteristics of folks who are already afflicted?
So it certainly can cause temporary psychotic episodes. It can cause paranoia, it can cause panic attacks, it can cause temporary psychotic episodes. I think the evidence is quite strong, and the National Academy of Medicine report from 2017 said cannabis use raises the risk of developing schizophrenia. The higher the use, the higher the risk. That to me is very clear language. There are people on the advocacy side, and I suspect Dr. Nathan may be one of them, who say that hasn't been proven yet. I think it has been proven enough that it is something we need to warn people about.
Dr. Nathan, will you respond first to the argument relative to violence and then to the argument pertaining to mental health?
Sure. It's pretty clear that what Alex is saying is simply not supported by science. There is not the correlation between cannabis and violence, and in fact, some studies actually show the opposite. Can you find studies that show that there is some linkage? Yes. But you can also find studies that show no effect, and just recently there was a study showing that the rates of violence among couples, domestic violence, is decreased among cannabis-using couples.
And on the issue of mental health, what connection, if any, do you believe exists between smoking pot and psychosis or schizophrenia?
Sure. The claim that advocates have been either suppressing or denying what's going on with cannabis and its effect on mental health is simply untrue. First of all, I wrote an article in 2013 about the possible relationship between the triggering of psychosis and the exacerbation of psychosis among cannabis users that are predisposed to psychosis, and perhaps, Alex, you should have read that. Because in your book, you're saying that not only is this not true, but that somehow we are hiding this fact. And the bottom line is that we know that the arrow goes in the opposite direction. That people who are predisposed to mental illness will self-medicate with cannabis, and that's also true among people with psychosis. Now, as far as educating the public about the real risks of psychosis, I agree that it's important to acknowledge the degree to which people who are predisposed to psychosis should not be using cannabis recreationally, certainly not outside of a doctor's supervision. But I would say that this book that you've written that is really one-sided, and as you say in your opening chapter, that it is not intended to be balanced. Well, that's a real disservice to the public that needs to know what the real risks and the real health effects of cannabis are. And this whole thing actually just sidesteps the question of the social justice costs and public health costs of the prohibition itself.
So
Alex Berenson, go ahead.
You'll note that Dr. Nathan didn't say that he doesn't believe that cannabis causes psychosis. Certainly, that doesn't cause temporary psychosis. Because he knows. He's a physician. He's a psychiatrist. He knows the truth about this. He said that he has discussed this openly, and that's great. I'm glad to hear that. As for the violence issue, I have more than a dozen studies in the book with rate ratios, meaning that show an actual increase in violence in cannabis users. There's devastating data around child fatalities and child near fatalities showing that a huge percentage of the people, this is from multiple states, who are involved in the death or the near death of a child in their care are using cannabis at the time. There's a lot of data here that has been piling up sort of quietly for the last 5 or 10 years. And I think advocates are going to need to grapple with this, that this is real. This does not mean that we're going to put millions of people in jail for cannabis use, but we need to understand that this drug is not risk-free. It's not the panacea that it's being sold as by both the advocacy community and the for-profit dispensary and grower community.
Look,
Alex Berenson, Dr. David Nathan, thank you. It's a great conversation that I feel is just getting started. Appreciate your both being here.